God bless America. Hello, everybody. I am the Talk Radio Protege. This is the Protege program. Thank you so much for joining me. We have news breaking somewhat late in the day today on the Mueller investigation front. So, Paul Manafort, who has been under the most, I would say under the most heat from the Mueller investigation, was convicted today on some of the charges that he was facing. The jury declared a mistrial on some of the other counts, but on bank and tax fraud, Paul Manafort has been convicted. Now, a question I'm going to be asking more than once in this video is how does this relate to Russian collusion? And if any of you, my viewers, have anything to say about this, have any insights for me, I would love to hear them. Now, so far as I see it, I was listening to Sean Hannity's radio show a few moments ago, and he had McCarthy on, Andy McCarthy, talking about some of this stuff. And Andy McCarthy was a prosecutor for the Southern District of New York for 20 years, and he pointed out that Manafort is the only person so far in the orbit of Trump. Remember, I've talked about the orbit of Trump, and it doesn't take a lot to be in the orbit of Trump from the eyes of the Mueller investigation. But Paul Manafort is the only person in the orbit of Trump who's under fire from the Mueller investigation for having ties to the Russians. Manafort is the strongest point of connection because he dealt quite a bit with some Kremlin-connected individuals in his time as a private citizen. And he's now been convicted of these charges, which don't have much of anything, as far as I know, to do with the campaign and with Russian collusion. Now, with that talked about, the other big story of the day on the Mueller front is about Michael Cohn. Michael Cohn has come to a plea deal with prosecutors, not from the Mueller investigation, but maybe this one was from the Southern. Yeah, Michael Cohn comes to a plea agreement with prosecutors from the Southern District of New York about charges facing him, and they are campaign finance violations. According to Michael Cohn, these violations were, I'll read it this way. The way the headline puts it, Michael Cohn is claiming that Trump directed him to commit campaign finance violations. Now, as Andy McCarthy was describing it on Hannity's show today, the campaign finance violation is not reporting the money that Cohn spent on behalf of the Trump campaign. That money, if you'll remember, was the hush money that was allegedly paid to the women that were saying that they had affairs with Trump. Stormy Daniels and one other person. And Cohn is saying that Trump directed him to make those payments at the very least. But what Andy McCarthy has said is that the crime is not making the payment. The crime is not telling the FEC about it, the Federal Election Commission. And so when Cohn says Trump, the candidate, that was being Trump, told me to make this payment, Trump telling Cohn to make a payment is not a crime. If Trump had told Cohn to not report it to the FEC, that might be a crime. That might be something in addition. But that's not what the tapes that Michael Cohn leaked or maybe were seized from Cohn, that's not what the tapes reveal. The tapes reveal that Trump told Cohn to make the payment, and Cohn then decided to not tell the FEC about it. Now, there's an argument to be made whether or not there was an implicit direction to not report that to the FEC, but I think that would be a dubious argument to try to make. Now, again, I circle back to the question, what does this have to do with Russian collusion? And so far as I can tell, this has nothing to do with Russian collusion. Here is why. As I said a few moments ago, Papadopoulos has the strongest ties back to the Kremlin of anybody in the Trump orbit. Michael Cohen has none that I can think of, none that I can tell off the top of my head, and yet he's being pressured really heavily by the Southern District of New York, and he has finally entered into a plea deal. Now, let's talk about Mueller for a few moments. Mueller was appointed as special counsel against the directives and the guidelines of the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice has guidelines for assigning a special prosecutor, and those guidelines say you need to give the special prosecutor a discrete, specific objective, a crime to investigate. Now, when I say discrete, I don't mean secret, I mean strictly defined. And Mueller was given none of that. Mueller was given infinite time, infinite resources, and infinite scope, which is against the guidelines from the Department of Justice. But ostensibly, I would assume that Mueller was appointed for the purpose of investigating Russian collusion. I think that I'm going to go out on a little bit of a limb and assume that if you polled the American people what was Robert Mueller's original mandate, people would say to investigate Russian collusion or to investigate Russian interference. And what we've landed upon at this point in time is Mueller investigating and delivering indictments directed at people who have nothing to do with Russian collusion. So Mueller has gone far beyond his original mandate, even though, for anybody that's been paying attention, he had no original mandate. He has an infinite mandate, is the way that it works out. So I want to pivot now, and I want to talk a little bit more specifically about these campaign finance violations. Big takeaway to this point in the video: Mueller is not getting anything done as far as Russian collusion goes. He's totally shifted at this point to punishing anybody in the Trump orbit that did anything wrong. Michael Flynn, George Papadopoulos, Michael Cohn. The path continues. There's no end in sight so far. Pivoting now, I want to talk for a few moments about campaign finance violations, because this is one of the greatest double legal standards that I think you can witness at this point in living history. Now let's go back in time a little bit. Let's talk about a few individuals who have been punished for committing campaign finance violations. You go back to 2008. The Obama administration failed to report $2 million worth of last-minute donations to the campaign. And yet, nobody on the Obama campaign team faced any jail time. They were slapped with the biggest fine in campaign finance violation history, but nobody faced any jail time. That was $2 million. Fast forward 4 years, 2012, Dinesh D'Souza commits campaign finance violation to the tune of $15,000. Doing some quick math in my head, that's nearly 8 times less, a little bit more than 8 times less, the campaign finance violations of the Obama administration, or the Obama campaign, rather. What does Dinesh D'Souza get hammered with for that crime, for a crime of $15,000? Dinesh D'Souza goes to prison. I can't recall off the top of my head for how long that was. I think it was 1 year, maybe it was 2. But he goes to prison for a couple of years for $15,000 worth of campaign finance violations. Eight-ish times less than the amount that the Obama administration, I keep saying administration, that the Obama campaign was merely fined over. Fast forward now 6 years to the Michael Cohn campaign finance violation. Michael Cohn commits roughly $300,000 worth of campaign finance violations. That's about 6 times less than the Obama administration, than the Obama campaign violations. And obviously I've done some math wrong, because 300,000 being 6 times less than 2 million doesn't compute with 15,000 being, maybe 15,000 is 80 times less than 2 million. So just think about the difference in severities there as we're talking about this. Cohn, $300,000 worth of campaign finance violations, and he's looking at, according to this Fox News story, let's see if I can find exactly where they talk about the terms of the deal. Cohn is looking at, could receive up to 65 years in prison. However, a source familiar with the deal told Fox News that Cohn will only be jailed between 3 and 5 years. Here's something else to note. The deal does not involve a cooperation agreement with federal prosecutors. Before the terms of the deal were released, Drudge Report had in bright red font on their on that page that cooperation was possible. I can only imagine what the cable news media would have been saying, waiting for, I'm sure salivating over hearing the terms of this deal. But Michael Cohn, so Barack Obama, $2 million, gets a $300,000 fine. His campaign does anyway. Michael Cohn, $300,000, roughly 6 times less. He gets 3 to 5 years in prison. Dinesh D'Souza, $15,000, roughly 80 times less, the $2 million of Obama's campaign, and he gets jail time as well. There is very, very clearly a 2-tier justice system at work in the United States of America. Whether you want to admit it or not, it's there, it's true. Now, I'll give anybody that wants to come to the defense of Barack Obama at least this. And my knowledge of his campaign violations is as green as the spring grass. A late-breaking donation that you just forgot to report to the FEC, I can understand maybe getting a slap on the wrist for that. I can at least understand, okay, this happened at the last minute, and we had already filled out the paperwork, and we just didn't catch that we needed to make this change before we sent it off to the FEC. I can accept that might be a little bit less severe of a violation. But when you're talking about dollar amounts and direct impact on an election, $2 million we're talking about here in a $7.5 million campaign for the Obama campaign in 2008. What is that? Quick math. Somebody help me. What is that, a third? That's about a quarter of the campaign spending in those monies that weren't reported to the FEC. Have a little bit more time. I want to spend a couple of moments talking about a story that I have neglected to this point. And that's that Asia Argento, one of the spearheads behind the Me Too movement, has been accused of sexual assault of a minor. And this has got people asking all kinds of questions about the Me Too movement. And we've got a few headlines here that we can look at to try and get a feel of the way that the left and the mainstream media and other press outlets are talking about this issue. As you're going to see here, we have some headlines that are just conveying facts, and we have some headlines that are conveying opinion as well. So the first one here from The Atlantic, Asia Argento, Me Too, and the complicated question of power. Now, we're going to take a few looks at a different story later on in this video, but what is complicated about the question of power? You know, if the accuser is to be believed, as we've been told we should do, then Asia Argento used her position as a mentor and role model for this younger actor to lure him into a sexual relationship, which allegedly has severely damaged this person's development. NBC News, Asia Argento denies sexual assault of 17-year-old, says Anthony Bourdain made the payment. Now that's awfully convenient, seeing as how Bourdain killed himself about a month or so ago. He's not even around to defend himself, and she's pointing fingers at her old boyfriend. From CNN, Rose McGowan, a fellow Me Too movement figure, is facing backlash for urging be gentle with Argento. Now that seems to suggest something a little bit different. It's almost suggesting it's something else that some of the people who've been commenting on this have been suggesting, that we should take it easy as far as legal prosecution goes on people who've been victims of crimes, as if being a victim of a crime absolves you of any wrongdoings that you might commit while committing another crime. Now, I'm going to go ahead and go on to this story here because I don't want to run too long. The Washington Post wrote an opinion article, Molly Roberts at the Washington Post wrote an opinion article titled, "The Asia Argento Accusation Proves Me Too's Point." Now, go and read this for yourself, because we're not going to spend a whole lot more time here. But there's a couple of paragraphs that I want to take a look at. Let's begin with this paragraph here. "The scandal has come as a boon to critics eager to discredit Me Too as a movement, but Argento's apparent hypocrisy doesn't make the Me Too movement hypocritical as a whole. What could is how those who support it choose to respond to the report, which is what makes it so important that this latest episode lead to a discussion of the complexities of sexual assault. Complexity, after all, is what Me Too is all about." Now, I myself, as a person that doesn't like to participate in social media drama or the entertainment world drama and that sort of thing, I see Me Too as not a conversation about complexity, because as far as I have seen it, people that are pushing Me Too are pushing it as men are abusing women and we need to listen and believe to victims. Victims deserve to be believed, we've been told by some people that are pushing this Me Too movement. And it turns out, again, as has been the case frequently, people pushing for quote-unquote women's rights, people pushing this listen and believe type stuff, end up being abusers of the people that they're now advocating for the defense of. So it's interesting to me that a person writing now for a mainstream media publication who I assume has a left-wing bias, who I assume is on the side of Me Too, is now saying, well, Me Too has always been about complexity. I don't really think that it's fair to say that's the case. It seems to me like Me Too has been all about simplicity. It's very black and white. A woman accuses a man of sexually assaulting her. We need to believe her. And the man needs to be punished. That seems much more simple than the complexity that the column is going to go on to talk about. Now, I'm going to go ahead and call it there. We're running up against the 20-minute mark, and I don't really like to go over 20 minutes unless, of course, it's something that I'm really on a roll about. So that's going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you've enjoyed. Leave a like if you did. Hit subscribe and hit the bell for notifications so that you don't miss future videos. Don't forget to let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. I hope that you'll come back and join me next time. Until then, good night and God bless.